Hello, everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The baseball mystery. Why Americans love a game I didn't understand. Imagine this. You're sitting on a couch in a living room that is not yours, in a country that is not yours, watching a sport that makes absolutely no sense to you. A man throws a ball. Another man swings a stick. Sometimes he hits it. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes people run. Sometimes they stop. The crowd cheers for reasons you cannot explain. The game goes on for hours. And hours. And hours. And you sit there, smiling and nodding, pretending to understand, while inside your head a voice is screaming. What is happening? Why do people care about this? And why does my father-in-law love it so much? That was me. That was my first summer in America. And the sport that was torturing me was baseball. I came from a country where baseball did not exist. We had soccer. We had basketball. We had running and jumping and sports that made sense to me. But baseball? Baseball was a mystery. A confusing, slow, baffling mystery. The rules were like a secret code that everyone seemed to know except me. And my father-in-law, Bob, was obsessed with it. Bob was a quiet man. The kind of man who didn't say much, but always seemed to be thinking. He had a gentle smile, weathered hands, and a way of looking at you that made you feel like he understood everything you weren't saying. He was a good man. A kind man. He had welcomed me into his family with open arms, never once making me feel like an outsider. But there was one thing that made me feel like a foreigner every single time. Baseball. Bob loved baseball more than almost anything. He had played it as a kid. He had coached his son's little league team. He had season tickets to the local team. He watched games on TV every single night, even when the season was over, even when the games were replays from years ago. He could tell you the statistics of players from the 1970s. He could name the batting averages of people you had never heard of. He knew baseball like I knew my own language. And I knew nothing. I remember the first time I sat down to watch a game with him. It was a hot summer evening. The windows were open. The sound of crickets filled the air. Bob was in his favorite chair, a cold beer in his hand, his eyes fixed on the TV. I sat on the couch, trying to look interested. "Do you like baseball?" he asked. "Yes," I lied. "I love it." He smiled. "Good. Because this is going to be a great game." And then he turned back to the TV. The game started. The pitcher threw the ball. The batter swung. He missed. The umpire shouted something. The crowd cheered. I had no idea why. I looked at Bob. He was completely absorbed. He leaned forward. He muttered something under his breath. He nodded. He shook his head. He was in another world. And I was lost. I tried to understand. I watched the players. I watched the ball. I watched the scoreboard. Nothing made sense. Why did the players keep running and stopping? Why did the game take so long? Why did the crowd cheer for things that seemed so small? I had so many questions, but I didn't want to ask them. I didn't want to look stupid. I didn't want to reveal that I was still a foreigner, still an outsider, still someone who didn't belong. So I just sat there, staring at the screen, pretending to be interested, while my brain slowly melted. That was my first baseball experience.
And it was not my last.
Because Bob was determined to teach me, not just about baseball, about something deeper. Something that he couldn't explain with words, but that he could show me through the game. He started small. He would point at the screen and say, "See that? That's a fastball." Or, "That's a curveball." Or, "That was a strike, see?" I would nod and repeat the words. Fastball. Curveball.
Strike.
He would smile and nod back. "Good," he would say. "You're learning." But I wasn't learning. Not really. I was memorizing words without understanding what they meant. It was like learning English all over again. The words were there, but the meaning was missing. I had spent years learning English the same way, memorizing vocabulary, repeating sentences, going through the motions. But it wasn't until I started living the language that I truly understood it. And baseball was the same. I couldn't learn it from a book. I couldn't learn it from a TV screen. I had to live it. I had to feel it. I had to experience it. And Bob knew that. He was patient. He was kind. He never made me feel stupid for not understanding. He just kept explaining, kept pointing, kept encouraging. You'll get it, he would say. It takes time. And he was right. It did take time. It took months of sitting on that couch, watching game after game, asking questions, making mistakes, and slowly starting to understand. The moment it clicked was unexpected. It was a late summer afternoon. The game was close. The crowd was tense. The batter hit the ball and started running. The crowd cheered. The ball flew through the air. The fielder caught it. The crowd groaned. And suddenly I understood. I understood the strategy. I understood the risk. I understood the drama. I understood why people cared. It wasn't about the ball. It wasn't about the bat. It was about the story, the tension, the hope, the possibility that anything could happen. Baseball wasn't just a game. It was a metaphor for life, a metaphor for trying and failing and trying again, a metaphor for belonging to something bigger than yourself. And in that moment, I realized that Bob hadn't just been teaching me baseball. He had been teaching me how to be an American. Because that is what America is. A game. A long, slow, complicated game that doesn't always make sense. A game where you swing and miss, and then you swing again. A game where you fail more often than you succeed, but you keep showing up because that is what you do. A game where the crowd cheers for you even when you strike out, because they know that tomorrow you might hit a home run.
Bob taught me that.
Through baseball, he taught me something that no English class ever could.
He taught me how to belong.
That is the story I want to share with you. Not a story about baseball. A story about connection. A story about a father-in-law and a daughter-in-law who learned to speak the same language, even when the words were different. A story about how sports can teach more than words ever can. And I promise you, it gets even better from here. My American dad, the quiet man who spoke through baseball.
Let me tell you about Bob.
My father-in-law, the man who would become my American dad. He was not a loud man, not a man who filled a room with his voice. He was the kind of person who observed more than he spoke, who listened more than he preached, who made you feel like you were the most interesting person in the world just by the way he looked at you when you talked. He was tall and weathered, with hands that had worked hard all his life. His hair had turned gray long before I met him, but his eyes were still sharp and blue, full of a quiet wisdom that he rarely shared in words. He was the kind of man who said more with a nod than most people say with a speech. And he loved baseball. Not the kind of love that is casual or superficial. The kind of love that is deep and old and rooted in memory. The kind of love that connects you to your childhood, to your father, to your country. Bob had grown up with baseball. His father had taught him. His grandfather had taught his father. It was a tradition that stretched back generations, a thread that connected him to his past. And when I married his son, he wanted to include me in that thread.
He wanted to pass something on to me. But I didn't understand that then.
I was too busy being confused, too busy feeling like an outsider, too busy worrying about my accent and my grammar and my inability to fit in. I didn't realize that Bob was trying to give me a gift that didn't come in a box, a gift that came in the form of a game I didn't understand, a game that seemed boring and slow and pointless, a game that I would eventually learn was the key to everything. Bob's relationship with baseball was not just about the sport. It was about connection. It was about belonging. It was about finding a way to communicate when words failed. And words often failed with me. My English was still shaky in those early years. I could hold a conversation, but I couldn't express deep emotions. I couldn't talk about my fears, my insecurities, my longing to belong.
I didn't have the vocabulary for that.
And Bob, who was not a talker anyway, didn't have the vocabulary either. So we sat in silence. Not an awkward silence. A comfortable silence. The silence of two people who didn't know how to say what they really meant. But Bob found a way. He found a way through baseball. He would point at the screen and say, "Watch this." And I would watch. He would explain the rules slowly and patiently, using simple words I could understand. He would show me the strategy, the tension, the beauty of the game. He would teach me the language of baseball. And through that language, he taught me something else. He taught me how to be part of his world. I started to notice things. The way the crowd held its breath before a pitch. The way the players moved with a grace that seemed effortless, but was actually the result of years of practice. The way the game unfolded like a story, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. The way anything could happen, even when you least expected it. I started to understand the rhythm, the slow, deliberate pace that seemed boring at first, but was actually full of tension. The long pauses between pitches, when the whole stadium was waiting, hoping, praying for something to happen. The moments of chaos when the ball was hit and everyone started running, and there was a split second of pure, unfiltered excitement. It was like learning a new language all over again. At first, it was just words.
Strike, ball, foul, hit, run, out.
Then it became sentences. He's stealing second base. That was a double play. He's on a hot streak. Then it became a story. A story with heroes and villains, triumphs and failures, hope and despair. And finally, it became a feeling that I could share with Bob. A feeling that didn't require words. A feeling that said, I am here. I am part of this. I belong. I remember the moment it happened. It was a late summer evening. The game was close. The home team was trailing by 2 runs in the bottom of the 9th inning. The crowd was on its feet, screaming, clapping, praying. Bob was leaning forward, his hands gripping the armrest of his chair. I was sitting next to him, my heart pounding, even though I didn't fully understand why. The batter hit the ball. It flew high into the air, rising and rising, like a bird that had been set free. The crowd went quiet. Everyone watched. The ball kept flying. It went over the fence. A home run. A walk-off home run. The crowd exploded. Bob jumped out of his chair, his fist in the air, a smile on his face that I had never seen before. And I jumped too. I didn't know why I was jumping. But I was. I was laughing. I was cheering. I was part of it. Bob looked at me. His eyes were bright. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He just nodded. And I nodded back. In that moment, we understood each other. Not through words. Through the game. Through baseball. Through the shared joy of something that was bigger than both of us. That was the moment I became American. Not because I had a passport. Not because I spoke English perfectly. Because I had learned to love what Americans loved. Because I had learned to feel what Americans felt. Because I had learned that belonging is not about fitting in. It is about sharing something real. Something honest. Something that connects you to the people around you, even when you don't have the words to say it.
Bob taught me that.
Through baseball. Through patience. Through love. And I will be grateful to him for the rest of my life. That summer, I learned something else too. I learned that sports are not just games. They are a language. A language that can transcend borders, cultures, and accents. A language that can connect people who have nothing else in common. A language that can teach you more about a country than any textbook ever could. Baseball taught me that. Bob taught me that. And now I want to teach you. In the next section, I will tell you about the first game. The first time I sat down with Bob to watch baseball and how it changed everything. Because that game was not just a game. It was the beginning of a journey. A journey that would take me from confusion to clarity, from fear to belonging, from outsider to family. And I promise you, it is a journey worth taking. The first game, sitting in the stands of confusion. Let me take you back to that summer. The first time Bob invited me to watch baseball with him at the ballpark. Not on TV, not in his living room, in the stadium, with the crowd, with the hot dogs, with the smell of grass and dust and summer heat. I was nervous, not because I didn't want to go, because I knew that this was a test of my willingness to try, a test of my willingness to belong, a test of my willingness to sit through hours of a game I didn't understand and pretend to enjoy it. Bob picked me up in his old pickup truck. He was wearing a faded baseball cap and a jersey that had seen better days. He looked like he belonged there, like the ballpark was his second home. I was wearing my regular clothes, feeling out of place, feeling like everyone would know that I was a fraud. Ready? He asked. Ready? I lied. We drove to the stadium. The parking lot was packed. The crowd was buzzing with excitement. People were wearing jerseys, waving foam fingers, eating hot dogs, laughing, shouting, singing. It was like a carnival that I didn't understand. Bob led me through the crowd. He seemed to know everyone. He nodded at the security guard. He waved at the ticket taker. He greeted the vendor selling peanuts. He was part of this world, and I was just a visitor. We found our seats. They were good seats, close to the field, close enough to see the players' faces, close enough to hear the crack of the bat. I sat down. I looked around. The stadium was huge. The field was green and perfect. The sky was blue and endless. And I felt small, very small. Bob leaned over. I'll explain everything, he said. Just watch and ask questions. I nodded. I didn't want to ask questions. I didn't want to look stupid.
But I knew I had to.
I knew that if I didn't ask, I would never learn. The game started. The pitcher threw the ball. The batter swung. He missed. The umpire shouted something. The crowd cheered.
I had no idea why.
That was a strike, Bob said. The batter didn't swing, and the ball was in the strike zone. So it's a strike. Okay, I said. Strike. Good, he said. You're getting it. The next pitch. The batter swung and hit the ball. It went flying into the air. The crowd rose to its feet. The ball flew toward the outfield. A player ran, jumped, and caught it. The crowd groaned. That was a fly out, Bob said. He caught it before it hit the ground. So the batter is out. Out, I repeated.
Yes, out.
I started to understand.
Slowly.
Painfully. Word by word. Play by play. Inning by inning. It was like learning a new language. The words were foreign, but the patterns were starting to make sense. I watched the players run. I watched them stop. I watched them throw. I watched them catch. I started to see the rhythm, the strategy, the chess game that was happening on the green field. Bob was patient. He explained every play, every rule, every nuance. He didn't get frustrated when I asked the same question twice. He didn't make me feel stupid when I didn't understand. He just kept teaching. See that, he said, pointing at the field. He's stealing second base. Stealing,
I said.
How do you steal a base? He runs from first to second while the pitcher is throwing to the batter, Bob explained. If he makes it, he steals the base. If he doesn't, he's out. And that's allowed? I asked. That's allowed, he said, smiling. It's part of the game. I shook my head. It's crazy. It's America, he said. And he laughed. I started to see the beauty in the chaos, the strategy, the risk,
The reward.
the moments of brilliance and the moments of failure. The way the game could change in an instant. The way one swing of the bat could turn defeat into victory. I started to feel the emotion, the tension, the hope, the despair.
The joy.
I was no longer just watching. I was feeling. And that, I realized, was the point. Bob wasn't just teaching me the rules. He was teaching me to care. To invest.
To belong.
By the seventh inning, something had shifted. I was no longer sitting there, pretending to understand. I was leaning forward, my eyes glued to the field, my heart pounding with every pitch. I was part of it. I was part of the crowd. I was part of the game. Bob looked at me. He didn't say anything, but he smiled, and I smiled back. In that moment, I understood. Baseball wasn't just a game. It was a bridge. A bridge between me and Bob. A bridge between me and America. A bridge between me and belonging. The game ended. The home team won. The crowd cheered. Bob and I walked back to the truck in comfortable silence. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. I understood. And that understanding was more valuable than any words. That night, I went home and I couldn't stop thinking about it. The game.
The crowd. The joy.
The connection. I had never experienced anything quite like it. I had never felt so included, so welcomed, so at home. Bob had given me a gift. A gift that didn't come in a box. A gift that came in the form of a game. A game that taught me more about America than any textbook ever could. And I was grateful. Deeply, profoundly grateful. In the next section, I'll tell you about the moment I realized that baseball was not just a sport. It was a language that Bob was teaching me. A language that would change my life forever. Because that is what this story is about. Not baseball. Connection. And the power of a father-in-law who refused to give up on his foreign daughter-in-law. Lost in translation. When baseball felt like a foreign language. You know that feeling when you are in a room full of people speaking a language you don't understand, and everyone is laughing at a joke. And you are just sitting there, smiling awkwardly, hoping no one notices that you have no idea what is going on? That was me. Every single time Bob talked about baseball, he would use words that sounded like English but meant nothing to me. He's got a great ERA. His OBP is off the charts. That was a bang-bang play. I would nod and smile and pretend to understand. But inside, I was drowning in a sea of unfamiliar terms. What was ERA? What was OBP? What was a bang-bang play? I had no idea. And I was too embarrassed to ask. Because I didn't want to look stupid. I didn't want to reveal that I was still an outsider, still a foreigner, still someone who didn't belong. I thought that if I asked questions, Bob would realize that I was a fraud. That I didn't really understand baseball. That I didn't really understand America. That I didn't really belong in his family. So I stayed silent. I nodded. I smiled. I pretended. And I felt more and more alone. Until one day Bob noticed. We were watching a game together. The announcer said something about a player's batting average.
He nodded like he understood.
Bob looked at me. He didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at me with those calm, knowing eyes. Then he said, "You don't understand what that means, do you?" I froze. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say, "Of course I do." But I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. So, I just shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "I don't understand." Bob smiled. Not a mean smile. A kind smile. The kind of smile that says, "It's okay. You don't have to pretend."
"It's all right," he said.
It took me years to learn all this stuff, and I grew up with it.
He paused.
Let me explain. And then he did. He explained batting average.
He explained ERA.
He explained OBP. He explained all the stats and terms and rules that I had been pretending to understand for months. And he did it in simple words. Words I could understand. Words that didn't make me feel stupid. Words that made me feel like I was finally starting to understand. That moment changed everything. Not because I suddenly understood baseball. Because I realized that Bob didn't care if I understood baseball. He cared if I was willing to learn. He cared if I was willing to try. He cared if I was willing to be vulnerable enough to say, "I don't understand.
Please help me."
That is what connection is. Not knowing everything. Not being perfect. Not pretending. It is being willing to say, "I don't know, but I want to learn." And Bob was willing to teach. He was patient. He was kind. He never made me feel stupid for not understanding. He just kept explaining, kept pointing, kept encouraging. I started to realize something. Baseball was not just a game. It was a language. A language with its own vocabulary, its own grammar, its own rules. And like any language, it took time to learn. It took practice. It took making mistakes. It took being willing to look foolish in front of people who were already fluent. That is what learning English had been like. The same fear, the same embarrassment, the same desire to hide, the same belief that I had to be perfect before I could be seen. And Bob was showing me that the opposite was true. I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to be willing to try. I started to ask more questions. What does that mean? Why did he do that? What happens next? And every time I asked, Bob answered. Patiently. Kindly. Without judgment. He didn't just give me the answers. He gave me the context. He gave me the story. He gave me the meaning behind the words. And slowly, like a puzzle coming together, baseball started to make sense. I started to understand the strategy, the tension, the drama, the beauty. I started to see the game not as a series of random events, but as a story unfolding in real time. A story with heroes and villains, triumphs and failures, hope and despair. A story that was different every single time. I started to feel the emotion, the joy of a home run, the heartbreak of a strikeout, the tension of a close game, the relief of a victory. I was no longer just watching. I was feeling. I was investing. I was belonging. And that, I realized, was the point. Bob wasn't just teaching me baseball. He was teaching me how to be American. He was teaching me how to care about something that mattered to Americans. He was teaching me how to share in the joy and the pain of a game that was more than just a game. He was teaching me how to belong. That is what I want to share with you. Not just the story of learning baseball, the story of learning to belong, the story of finding a way to connect, even when the words are different, the story of a father-in-law who refused to let me be an outsider. In the next section, I'll tell you about the moment Bob gave me a gift. A gift that was small and simple, but meant more to me than anything he could have bought. A gift that showed me, more than any words ever could, that I was part of this family. And I promise you, it will make you smile. The glove gift, a worn-out treasure that meant everything. A few weeks after that first game, Bob called me. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The sun was shining. The birds were singing. I was washing dishes, thinking about nothing in particular, when the phone rang. It was Bob. "I have something for you," he said. "Can you come over?" I was curious. Bob didn't usually call me. He was not a phone person. He preferred face-to-face conversations. So I knew that whatever he had, it was important. I drove to his house. He was waiting on the porch, sitting in his favorite rocking chair, a small object in his hands. He smiled when he saw me.
Come here, he said.
I walked up the steps. He handed me the object. It was a baseball glove.
Old. Worn.
Leather that had been broken in over years of use. The stitching was faded. The leather was soft and supple. It smelled like summer and grass and history. This was my father's glove, Bob said. He gave it to me when I was 8 years old. I used it for years. It's been in the family for a long time. I held the glove in my hands. I could feel the weight of it, the history, the memories, the love. I want you to have it, Bob said. I stared at him. Bob, I can't take this, I said. It's too precious. It's a family heirloom. That's exactly why I want you to have it, he said. You're family now. I felt tears forming in my eyes. Not sad tears. Grateful tears. Because Bob had just given me something more valuable than any gift he could have bought. He had given me a piece of his history. A piece of his heart. A piece of his family. I held the glove. It was heavy. Not physically. Emotionally. I could feel the generations in it. The fathers and sons who had played catch with this glove. The summers that had been spent in backyards and ballparks. The love that had been passed down through the years. And now Bob was passing it down to me. A foreigner. An outsider. Someone who had never caught a ball in her life. But he didn't see me as an outsider. He saw me as family. And that changed everything. Thank you, I whispered. You're welcome, he said. Now let's go outside. I'm going to teach you how to use it. We walked to the backyard. The grass was green. The sun was warm. The birds were singing. It was a perfect day for baseball. Bob stood about 20 feet away. He held a ball in his hand. He looked at me. He smiled. Ready? He asked. Ready, I said. He threw the ball. It was a gentle throw. A soft, easy throw. A throw designed for someone who had never caught a ball in her life. It arced through the air, slow and predictable. I watched it come toward me. I raised the glove. I positioned my hand. I was ready. The ball hit the glove and bounced right out. I stared at the ball on the ground. I stared at my glove. I stared at Bob. What happened? I asked. Bob chuckled. You closed your eyes, he said. You closed your eyes right before the ball hit. I did not, I said. You did, he said. You flinched. I had flinched. I had been so afraid of the ball hitting me that I had closed my eyes at the worst possible moment. And the ball had bounced off my glove and rolled into the grass. It was a small failure. A tiny failure. But it felt huge. I felt stupid. I felt clumsy. I felt like I would never understand this game, never be good at it, never belong. I wanted to give up. I wanted to put the glove down and walk away. But Bob didn't let me. Try again, he said. But this time, keep your eyes open. Watch the ball all the way into the glove. Don't look away. Don't flinch. I took a deep breath. I nodded. Okay, I said. I'll try. He threw the ball again. The same gentle arc. The same soft, easy throw. I watched it come. I kept my eyes open. I focused. I was not going to flinch. The ball hit the glove. And stayed. I caught it. I actually caught it. I looked at the ball in my glove. I looked at Bob. I smiled. I caught it, I said. You caught it, he said, smiling back. Good job. It was a small moment, a tiny victory, but it felt huge. I had done it. I had caught the ball. I had overcome my fear. I had learned something new. Bob threw the ball again, and again, and again. I caught some. I missed some. I dropped some, but I kept trying. And with every throw, I got a little better, a little more confident, a little more comfortable. I started to understand something. Something that went beyond baseball. Failure was not the enemy. Failure was the teacher. Every time I dropped the ball, I learned something. I learned not to close my eyes. I learned not to tense up. I learned to stay relaxed. I learned to trust myself. It was the same with English. Every mistake I made, every word I mispronounced, every sentence I stumbled over, those were not failures. They were lessons. They were teaching me what I needed to work on. They were showing me how to get better. I had spent so long trying to avoid mistakes, trying to be perfect, trying to hide my imperfections. But Bob was showing me that imperfections were not something to hide. They were something to embrace. They were the path to growth. That afternoon, I caught more balls than I dropped. I started to feel the rhythm, the flow, the joy of the game. I wasn't just learning to catch. I was learning to trust. Trust the glove. Trust the ball. Trust myself. And I was learning to trust Bob. He was patient. He was kind. He never made me feel stupid for making mistakes. He just kept throwing,
Kept teaching.
kept believing in me. By the end of the afternoon, I was exhausted. My arm hurt. My hand was sore. But I was happy. Happier than I had been in a long time. I had learned something valuable. Not just about baseball. About life. About growth. About the power of trying, failing, and trying again. Bob walked over to me. He put his hand on my shoulder. "You did good today," he said. "Really good." "I dropped a lot of balls," I said. "Everyone drops balls," he said. "The key is to pick them up and keep going." I nodded. I understood. That was the lesson. That was the gift. And I would carry it with me for the rest of my life. In the next section, I'll tell you about the moment I finally understood the real lesson of baseball. The moment when it all clicked. The moment when I realized that Bob hadn't just been teaching me a sport. He had been teaching me how to be part of a family. And I promise you, it will stay with you long after this video ends. Catching the ball, when failure became the best teacher. You know that feeling when you try something new and you are absolutely terrible at it? When your body refuses to cooperate with your brain. When you know what you are supposed to do, but your muscles just won't listen. That was me. The first time Bob took me to the backyard to teach me how to catch a baseball. He had handed me the glove, the old, worn, beautiful glove he had given me as a gift, and he had said, "Let's try catching." I had nodded confidently. "Sure," I said. "How hard can it be?" Famous last words. We stood in the backyard. The grass was green. The sun was warm. The birds were singing. It was a perfect day for baseball. Bob stood about 20 feet away. He held a ball in his hand.
He looked at me.
He smiled. "Ready?" he asked.
"Ready," I said.
He threw the ball. It was a gentle throw. A soft, easy throw. A throw designed for someone who had never caught a ball in her life. It arced through the air, slow and predictable. I watched it come toward me. I raised the glove. I positioned my hand. I was ready. The ball hit the glove and bounced right out. I stared at the ball on the ground. I stared at my glove. I stared at Bob. "What happened?" I asked. Bob chuckled. "You closed your eyes," he said. "You closed your eyes right before the ball hit." "I did not," I said. "You did," he said. "You flinched." I had flinched. I had been so afraid of the ball hitting me that I had closed my eyes at the worst possible moment. And the ball had bounced off my glove and rolled into the grass. It was a small failure. A tiny failure. But it felt huge. I felt stupid. I felt clumsy. I felt like I would never understand this game, never be good at it, never belong. I wanted to give up. I wanted to put the glove down and walk away. But Bob didn't let me. "Try again," he said. "But this time, keep your eyes open. Watch the ball all the way into the glove. Don't look away. Don't flinch. I took a deep breath. I nodded. Okay, I said. I'll try. He threw the ball again. The same gentle arc. The same soft, easy throw. I watched it come. I kept my eyes open. I focused. I was not going to flinch. The ball hit the glove and bounced right out again. I stared at the ball. I stared at my glove. I stared at Bob. I didn't close my eyes, I said. I know, he said. But you tensed up. Your hand was stiff. You have to be relaxed. Soft hands. Let the ball come to you. Don't fight it. He walked over to me. He took my hand and positioned it gently. He showed me how to hold the glove, how to relax my fingers, how to let the ball sink into the pocket. Soft hands, he repeated. Soft hands. I nodded. I tried again. The ball came toward me. I kept my eyes open. I kept my hand relaxed. I let the ball come to me. It hit the glove, and it stayed. I caught it. I actually caught it. I looked at the ball in my glove. I looked at Bob. I smiled. I caught it, I said. You caught it, he said, smiling back. Good job. It was a small moment, a tiny victory, but it felt huge. I had done it. I had caught the ball. I had overcome my fear. I had learned something new. Bob threw the ball again, and again, and again. I caught some. I missed some. I dropped some, but I kept trying. And with every throw, I got a little better, a little more confident, a little more comfortable. I started to understand something that went beyond baseball. Failure was not the enemy. Failure was the teacher. Every time I dropped the ball, I learned something. I learned not to close my eyes. I learned not to tense up. I learned to stay relaxed. I learned to trust myself. It was the same with English. Every mistake I made, every word I mispronounced, every sentence I stumbled over, those were not failures. They were lessons. They were teaching me what I needed to work on. They were showing me how to get better. I had spent so long trying to avoid mistakes, trying to be perfect, trying to hide my imperfections. But Bob was showing me that imperfections were not something to hide. They were something to embrace. They were the path to growth. That afternoon, I caught more balls than I dropped. I started to feel the rhythm, the flow, the joy of the game. I wasn't just learning to catch. I was learning to trust. Trust the glove. Trust the ball. Trust myself. And I was learning to trust Bob. He was patient. He was kind. He never made me feel stupid for making mistakes. He just kept throwing,
Kept teaching.
kept believing in me. By the end of the afternoon, I was exhausted. My arm hurt. My hand was sore. But I was happy. Happier than I had been in a long time. I had learned something valuable. Not just about baseball. About life. About growth. About the power of trying, failing, and trying again. Bob walked over to me. He put his hand on my shoulder. You did good today, he said. Really good. I dropped a lot of balls, I said. Everyone drops balls, he said. The key is to pick them up and keep going. I nodded. I understood. That was the lesson. That was the gift. And I would carry it with me for the rest of my life. In the next section, I'll tell you about the real lesson. The lesson that I didn't see coming. The lesson that made me realize that baseball was not just a game. It was a metaphor for everything that mattered. And it would change the way I saw myself, my family, and my place in this country forever. The real lesson, when baseball became a metaphor for everything. You know what I realized that afternoon in the backyard? It wasn't about the ball. It wasn't about the glove. It wasn't even about catching. It was about something much deeper. Something that Bob was teaching me without either of us knowing it. The real lesson wasn't baseball. The real lesson was life. And Bob, in his quiet, patient way, was showing me how to live it. I thought about all the times I had been afraid to try something new. All the times I had been afraid to fail. All the times I had been afraid to look stupid. All the times I had let fear hold me back from doing something I wanted to do. And I realized that baseball was just a smaller version of that fear. A safer version. A version where the stakes were low and the consequences were minimal. If I dropped the ball, nothing bad happened. I just picked it up and tried again. Bob had created a safe space for me. A space where I could fail without consequences. A space where I could learn without judgment. A space where I could grow without fear. And in that space, I was learning something that would change my life. I was learning that failure was not the end. It was the beginning. It was the beginning of growth. The beginning of understanding. The beginning of mastery. I thought about my English. All the mistakes I had made. All the words I had mispronounced. All the sentences I had stumbled over. I had treated each one like a failure. Each one had felt like a confirmation that I didn't belong. Each one had made me want to hide. But what if I treated them like dropped balls? What if I picked them up and tried again? What if I saw them not as failures, but as steps on the path to fluency? That was the real lesson. That was what Bob was teaching me. Not just how to catch a ball. How to live. How to fail. How to learn. How to grow. How to belong. I thought about all the people who had helped me along the way. The teachers who had been patient. The friends who had been kind. The strangers who had been generous. And I realized that they had all been creating safe spaces for me. Spaces where I could fail without consequences. Spaces where I could learn without judgment. Spaces where I could grow without fear. They had been giving me the same gift that Bob was giving me. The gift of permission.
Permission to try.
Permission to fail. Permission to learn. Permission to become. And I was grateful. Deeply, profoundly grateful. That afternoon I caught more balls than I dropped. I was getting better. More confident. More comfortable. I started to feel the rhythm. The flow. The joy of the game. I wasn't just learning to catch. I was learning to trust. Trust the glove. Trust the ball. Trust myself. And I was learning to trust Bob. He was patient. He was kind. He never made me feel stupid for making mistakes. He just kept throwing.
Kept teaching.
Kept believing in me. By the end of the afternoon, I was exhausted. My arm hurt. My hand was sore. But I was happy. Happier than I had been in a long time. I had learned something valuable. Not just about baseball.
About life.
About growth. About the power of trying, failing, and trying again. Bob walked over to me. He put his hand on my shoulder. "You did good today," he said. "Really good." "I dropped a lot of balls," I said. "Everyone drops balls," he said. "The key is to pick them up and keep going." I nodded. I understood. That was the lesson. That was the gift. And I would carry it with me for the rest of my life. I started to see the world differently after that. Every challenge became an opportunity to learn. Every mistake became a chance to grow. Every failure became a step toward success. I stopped being afraid of making mistakes. I started to embrace them. I started to see them as part of the process, part of the journey, part of what made me who I was. I thought about my children. I thought about what I wanted to teach them. I wanted to teach them the same lesson that Bob was teaching me. I wanted to teach them that it was okay to fail, that it was okay to make mistakes, that it was okay to be imperfect, that what mattered was not the failure, but the courage to try again. I wanted to create safe spaces for them. Spaces where they could learn without judgment. Spaces where they could grow without fear. Spaces where they could become who they were meant to be. That is what Bob gave me. A safe space. A space to learn. a space to grow, a space to belong. And that is what I want to give to you. A safe space. A space where you can practice your English without fear. A space where you can make mistakes and learn from them. A space where you can grow and become the person you want to be. That is the real lesson of the story. Not baseball, not English, not belonging. It is the courage to try, the courage to fail, the courage to try again, and the knowledge that you are not alone, that there are people who believe in you, that there are people who will create safe spaces for you, that there are people who will help you grow. Bob was one of those people, and I am grateful for him. Deeply, profoundly grateful. In the next section, I'll tell you about the heat of summer. The long, lazy afternoons when Bob and I would sit on the porch and watch the world go by. The moments that were not about baseball, but about something much deeper. The moments that taught me the real meaning of family. And I promise you, they will stay with you long after this video ends. The heat of summer, when silence became the language of love. The summer after that first baseball lesson was one of the hottest I had ever experienced in America. The sun was relentless. The air was thick and heavy. The grass turned brown and brittle. But I didn't mind, because that summer I discovered something beautiful. Something that had nothing to do with baseball, and everything to do with Bob. It started with the porch, Bob's porch. The one with the 2 rocking chairs and the old wooden floorboards that creaked when you walked on them. Every evening, Bob would sit on that porch. He would rock gently back and forth, sipping his iced tea, watching the sun set over the horizon. And one evening, he invited me to join him. "Come sit with me," he said. "I don't bite." I smiled. I sat down in the other rocking chair. It was comfortable. The kind of comfortable that comes from years of use. I leaned back. I looked at the sky. It was orange and pink and purple like a watercolor painting. "It's beautiful," I said. "It is," he said. "That's why I sit here every night. To watch the sky do its thing." We sat in silence. Not an awkward silence. A comfortable silence. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled with words. The kind of silence that says, "I'm here. You're here. That's enough." I started to notice things. The way the light changed as the sun went down. The way the colors shifted from bright to soft to dark. The way the stars started to appear, one by one, like tiny pinpricks of light. The way the crickets started to sing their evening song. It was peaceful.
Calm. Perfect.
And I realized that I had been missing this. All my life, I had been so busy running, so busy trying to be perfect, so busy trying to belong, that I had forgotten how to just be. How to sit. How to breathe. How to exist without needing to prove anything. Bob was showing me how. He wasn't teaching me with words. He was teaching me with presence. With his quiet, steady, unshakable presence. He was showing me that you don't have to fill every moment with conversation. That silence can be a form of connection. That sometimes the best thing you can do is just be there. Night after night, I sat on that porch with Bob. We watched the sunset. We watched the stars. We listened to the crickets. We didn't say much, but we didn't need to, because we were communicating, not with words, with presence, with the simple act of being together. I started to realize something. This was what family meant. Not grand gestures. Not elaborate conversations. Not perfect moments. The small, quiet moments. The moments when you just exist together. The moments when you don't have to perform or pretend. The moments when you can be yourself. Bob was giving me that. He was giving me the gift of presence. The gift of being seen. The gift of belonging. I thought about my own family. My family back home. The one I had left to come to America. I miss them. I miss the sound of their voices. I miss the smell of my mother's cooking. I miss the feeling of being surrounded by people who knew me, really knew me, since the day I was born. I thought I would never find that again. I thought that kind of connection was reserved for blood relatives. But I was wrong, because Bob was showing me that family is not just about blood. It is about presence. It is about showing up. It is about being there, day after day, even when there is nothing to say. That summer, I learned more from Bob than I had learned from any book or class. I learned that love is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is a sunset. Sometimes it is a rocking chair. Sometimes it is just sitting next to someone, watching the world go by, and knowing that you are not alone. I thought about my children. I thought about what I wanted to teach them. I wanted to teach them the lesson that Bob was teaching me. The lesson that you don't have to fill every moment with words. That silence can be a language. That presence can be a gift. That love can be found in the quietest of moments. I wanted to teach them that belonging is not about fitting in. It is about being seen. It is about being accepted. It is about being loved, even when you are silent, even when you are imperfect, even when you are just sitting on a porch, watching the sun go down. That is what Bob gave me. Not just a game. Not just a glove. Not just a lesson. He gave me a home in his heart,
A home in his family.
a home in this country, and I will be grateful to him for the rest of my life. The summer ended. The leaves started to change. The air grew cooler. But the memories stayed. They stayed in my heart. They stayed in my soul. They stayed in the way I saw the world. I started to see the beauty in the quiet moments, the power in the silence, the love in the presence. I started to be more present with my own children. I started to sit with them in silence. I started to watch the sunset with them. I started to teach them what Bob had taught me, that you don't have to say much to say everything. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just be there. I think about Bob often. I think about those evenings on the porch. I think about the sunsets. I think about the silence. I think about the love that was present in every single moment. And I smile, because he gave me a gift that no one else could give. He gave me the gift of belonging. He gave me the gift of presence. He gave me the gift of himself. In the next section, I'll tell you about the moment that brought everything together. The moment when Bob and I shared something that went beyond baseball, beyond language, beyond culture. The moment when I finally understood that I was not just a daughter-in-law. I was a daughter. And I promise you, it will change the way you see family forever. A grand slam moment when Bob knew I finally understood. The moment I'm about to describe didn't happen on the porch. It didn't happen in the backyard. It didn't happen during a catch. It happened in a stadium. A real stadium. With a real crowd. A real game. And a real moment that I will never forget. It was a year after Bob first taught me to catch. A year of watching games. A year of asking questions. A year of learning. A year of growing. A year of becoming a fan. Bob had invited me to a game at the big stadium. The one in the city. The one with the lights and the scoreboard and the thousands of screaming fans. The one where the big leaguers played. I was nervous. But not the same kind of nervous I had been the first time. This was different. This was excitement. This was anticipation. This was the nervousness of someone who actually cared about what was going to happen. We drove to the stadium. The parking lot was packed. The crowd was buzzing. People were wearing jerseys, waving foam fingers, eating hot dogs, laughing, shouting, singing. It was like a carnival that I now understood. Bob led me through the crowd. He still knew everyone. He nodded at the security guard. He waved at the ticket taker. He greeted the vendor selling peanuts. He was part of this world. And now, so was I. We found our seats. They were good seats, close to the field, close enough to see the players' faces, close enough to hear the crack of the bat. I sat down. I looked around. The stadium was huge. The field was green and perfect. The sky was blue and endless. And I felt small.
But not in a bad way.
In a good way. The way you feel when you are part of something bigger than yourself. Bob leaned over. Excited, he asked. Very, I said. And I meant it. The game started. The pitcher threw the ball. The batter swung. He missed. The umpire shouted something. The crowd cheered. And I understood. I knew exactly what was happening. I knew what a strike was. I knew what a ball was. I knew what a foul was. I knew what a hit was. I knew the game. I was no longer lost. I was found. The game continued. Inning after inning. Pitch after pitch. Hit after hit. The home team was losing. The crowd was getting restless. People were starting to leave. Bob was quiet. He was focused. He was hoping for a comeback. Then, in the bottom of the ninth inning, something happened. The home team had 2 outs. The bases were loaded. The batter stepped up to the plate. He was the team's best hitter. Everyone was on their feet. The crowd was screaming. My heart was pounding. Bob was leaning forward. The pitcher threw the ball. The batter swung. The crack of the bat was loud. The ball flew into the air. Higher and higher. The crowd rose to its feet. The ball kept flying. It soared over the outfielders' heads. It sailed over the fence. A grand slam. A walk-off grand slam. The stadium exploded. People were screaming,
Jumping.
hugging each other. Bob jumped out of his chair. His fist was in the air. His face was lit up with joy. And then he turned to me.
He looked at me.
His eyes were bright. And he said something that I will never forget. You understand, he said. You really understand. I didn't say anything. I just smiled. And I nodded. Because he was right. I did understand. I understood the game. I understood the strategy. I understood the tension. I understood the joy. I understood why people cared. I understood why Bob cared. I understood why America cared. And more than that, I understood what Bob had been trying to teach me all along. Baseball was not just a game. It was a way of connecting. A way of belonging. A way of being part of something that was bigger than yourself. A way of sharing joy, even with people you had never met. A way of being human. I had finally understood. Not just the game, the lesson. And Bob knew it. He didn't have to say anything.
He just looked at me.
And I looked at him. And in that moment, we were not father-in-law and daughter-in-law. We were just 2 people sharing a moment of pure joy. 2 people who had found a way to connect. 2 people who had found a way to belong. That moment on the field, with the crowd screaming and the players celebrating, was more than just a baseball game. It was a confirmation. A confirmation that I was no longer an outsider. A confirmation that I had found my place. A confirmation that I was part of this family. This country.
This story.
I cried. Not from sadness. From joy. From gratitude. From the overwhelming feeling of finally belonging. Bob put his hand on my shoulder. I knew you'd get it, he said. I knew you would. I nodded. It took me a while, I said. But I got there. That's all that matters, he said. You got there. We sat there for a while, watching the players celebrate, watching the crowd cheer, watching the moment unfold.
I didn't want it to end.
I wanted to stay in that moment forever. But all moments end. The game was over. The crowd was leaving. The stadium was emptying. And we had to go.
But I carried that moment with me.
I carried it in my heart. I carried it in my soul. I carried it in the way I saw the world. And I still carry it today. That moment taught me something that no English class ever could. It taught me that belonging is not about being perfect. It is about being present. It is about showing up. It is about sharing moments of joy with people who matter. It is about being willing to learn, even when it is hard. It is about being willing to fail, even when it is embarrassing. It is about being willing to try, even when you are not sure you will succeed. It is about being willing to connect, even when you are afraid. That is what baseball taught me. That is what Bob taught me. That is what America taught me. And that is what I want to teach you. In the next section, I'll tell you about the moment when I realized that Bob was not just my father-in-law. He was my father. The father I never knew I needed. The father who taught me how to belong. And I promise you, it will change the way you see family forever. Father and daughter. When baseball became the bridge to my heart. A few weeks after that Grand Slam game, I was sitting on Bob's porch again. The same porch, the same rocking chairs, the same sunset. But something was different. Something had shifted. I didn't feel like a guest anymore. I didn't feel like a visitor. I felt like I belonged. Bob was sitting in his chair, sipping his iced tea, watching the sun go down. I was sitting in mine, doing the same. We were silent, but it was a comfortable silence. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. I was thinking about that game, I said. The Grand Slam. Bob nodded. It was a good one. It was, I said. I don't think I've ever felt anything like that. The crowd. The noise.
The joy.
It was like everyone was connected. Like we were all feeling the same thing at the same time. Bob smiled. That's what baseball does, he said. It brings people together. It makes you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. I felt that, I said. For the first time, I really felt that. Bob looked at me.
You've come a long way, he said.
Do you remember that first game? You didn't understand anything. I remember, I said, laughing. I was so confused. I didn't know what a strike was. I didn't know what a ball was. I didn't know why people were cheering. And now, he asked. Now I know, I said. Now I understand. Bob nodded. You understand more than you think, he said. You understand what it means to be part of something.
I didn't say anything.
I just sat there, letting his words sink in. You know, he said, when I first met you, I was worried. Worried,
I said.
About what? About whether you would ever feel like part of the family, he said. I knew you were trying. I knew you wanted to belong. But I also knew how hard it was for you. The language, the culture, the distance from your home. He paused. I wanted to help you, but I didn't know how. I'm not good with words. I never have been.
So I did what I knew.
I taught you baseball. I felt tears forming in my eyes. You did more than teach me baseball, I said. You taught me how to belong. He smiled. That's what fathers do, he said. That word.
Father.
It hit me like a wave. I had been calling him Bob for years. But in that moment, he wasn't Bob. He was something more. Something deeper. Something that I had been missing my whole life. He was a father. My father. Not by blood.
But by choice.
By love. By the countless hours he had spent with me, teaching me, believing in me, never giving up on me. I looked at him. His face was weathered. His hair was gray. His hands were old and worn. But his eyes were bright, full of love, full of pride, full of the quiet, steady love that he had always shown me, even when I didn't know how to receive it. I never had a father like you, I said. My dad passed away when I was young. I don't remember much about him, but I think if he were alive, he would have been like you. Bob didn't say anything. He just reached over and took my hand, and we sat there, holding hands, watching the sunset, not saying a word. That moment was everything. everything I had been searching for, everything I had been longing for, everything I had been afraid I would never find. I had come to America looking for a better life. I had found a job. I had found a husband. I had found friends. But I had also found something I didn't know I was looking for. A father. A father who had chosen me. A father who had taught me how to belong. A father who had shown me that family is not about blood. It is about presence. It is about love. It is about showing up day after day, even when there is nothing to say. Bob was that father, and I was his daughter. I thought about all the moments that had led to this. The first game, the lessons,
The glove. The catch.
the grand slam, the porch, the sunsets, the silence. Each moment had been a thread that Bob had woven into a tapestry of love, a tapestry of belonging, a tapestry of family. And now I was part of that tapestry. I was part of his story,
Part of his family.
part of his heart. I didn't know how to thank him. I didn't have the words. So I just sat there, holding his hand, watching the sunset, and letting him know, without words, that I understood, that I was grateful, that I loved him. And he understood. He didn't need words. He never had. He had always communicated through presence, through silence, through love. And in that moment, we were connected in a way that transcended language, a way that didn't need English or any other language, a way that was universal, a way that was human. I think about that moment often. I think about Bob. I think about the father who chose me. I think about the love that he gave me, the love that I didn't know I needed, the love that changed my life. And I am grateful, deeply, profoundly grateful. In the next section, I'll tell you about the lesson that went beyond baseball. The lesson that Bob taught me about sports, about life, about love. The lesson that I will carry with me forever. And I promise you, it is a lesson that will change the way you see the world. More than words, what baseball taught me about patience, failure, and belonging. The summer ended. The leaves turned orange and red. The air grew crisp and cool. The baseball season ended too. The World Series came and went. The stadium fell silent. The TV broadcast stopped. And I missed it. I missed the games. I missed the rituals. I missed the quiet afternoons on the porch. But most of all, I missed Bob. We had grown so close over those months. Closer than I ever thought possible. He had become more than a father-in-law. He had become a father, a mentor, a friend. And I realized that what I had learned from him went far beyond baseball. It went far beyond sports. It went far beyond words. I started to think about all the lessons he had taught me, the ones he didn't try to teach, the ones that just happened, the ones that became part of who I was. Lesson 1, patience. Bob had been patient with me from the very beginning. He had never rushed me. He had never made me feel stupid for not understanding. He had just kept explaining, kept showing, kept believing in me. He had shown me that learning takes time, that understanding doesn't happen overnight, that growth is a slow, steady process. He had shown me that patience is not just about waiting. It is about trusting the process. It is about believing that things will come together in their own time. Lesson 2, failure. Bob had taught me that failure is not the end. It is the beginning. He had taught me to embrace my mistakes, to learn from them, to pick myself up and try again. He had shown me that every dropped ball was a chance to get better. Every strikeout was a chance to learn. Every loss was a chance to grow. He had shown me that failure is not something to fear. It is something to welcome, because it is the only way to improve, to become stronger, to become who you are meant to be. Lesson 3, belonging. Bob had taught me that belonging is not about fitting in. It is about being seen. It is about being accepted. It is about being loved for who you are, not who you pretend to be. He had shown me that I didn't have to be perfect to belong. I just had to be real. I just had to show up. I just had to be willing to try. He had shown me that family is not about blood. It is about presence. It is about love. It is about showing up day after day, even when there is nothing to say. Lesson 4. Connection. Bob had taught me that connection doesn't require words. It doesn't require perfect English. It doesn't require shared language. It requires presence. It requires attention. It requires the willingness to be with someone, even in silence. He had shown me that the deepest connections are often the quietest ones. The ones that don't need to be explained. The ones that just are. Lesson 5. Love. Bob had taught me that love is not a feeling. It is a choice. A choice to show up. A choice to be present. A choice to believe in someone, even when they don't believe in themselves. He had shown me that love is not about grand gestures. It is about small moments. It is about a glove passed down through generations. It is about a shared sunset. It is about a hand on a shoulder, a nod, a smile, a quiet presence. These were the lessons that Bob had taught me, not through words, through actions, through patience, through love. And I realized that these lessons were not just about baseball. They were about life, about how to live, about how to love, about how to belong. I thought about my English learning journey, how I had been so focused on getting it perfect, so focused on avoiding mistakes, so focused on sounding like a native speaker. And I realized that I had been missing the point.
The point was not to sound perfect. The point was to connect,
To communicate, to be seen, to be heard, to belong. And that didn't require perfect English. It required courage. It required presence. It required the willingness to show up, even when you are afraid. Bob had shown me that, not through a textbook, not through a lesson, through a baseball game, through a worn-out glove, through a quiet porch, through a love that transcended words. I started to think about my own children,
about what I wanted to teach them.
I wanted to teach them the lessons that Bob had taught me. I wanted to teach them patience. I wanted to teach them to embrace failure. I wanted to teach them that they belonged, just as they were. I wanted to teach them that connection is not about perfect words. It is about presence. It is about love. It is about showing up. I wanted to be for them what Bob had been for me. A guide. A mentor. A source of quiet, steady love. A person who believed in them, even when they didn't believe in themselves. That is what Bob gave me. A model of love. A model of belonging. A model of what it means to be a parent. And I will carry that model with me for the rest of my life. I think about Bob often. I think about the games. I think about the lessons. I think about the love. And I am grateful. Deeply, profoundly grateful. In the final section, I will bring this story to a close. I will tell you about Bob's legacy, about the lessons he left behind, about the ways he changed my life. And I will leave you with a question that I hope will stay with you long after this video ends. Because the answer to that question might just change everything. The legacy. When baseball became a gift that keeps giving. Bob died 2 years ago. It was sudden. A heart attack in his sleep. He was 78 years old. He had lived a full life. A good life. A life that had touched more people than he ever knew. I got the call from Mark early in the morning. I was making coffee. The phone rang. I picked it up. And Mark's voice was strange.
Thick.
Heavy.
He's gone, he said.
Dad passed away last night. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, holding the phone, staring out the kitchen window. The sun was rising. The birds were singing. The world was going on. But my world had stopped. I thought about Bob. I thought about the first game.
The glove.
The catch. The grand slam. The porch. The sunsets. The silence. I thought about the father he had become to me. The father I never knew I needed. And I cried. I cried for a long time. Not from sadness. From gratitude. Because he had given me so much. More than he would ever know. He had given me a home. A family. A sense of belonging. He had given me a language. Not English. Something deeper. Something that didn't require words. He had given me the gift of presence. The gift of patience. The gift of love. At the funeral, I stood in front of his casket. I didn't have words. I didn't know what to say.
So, I did what he had taught me.
I just stood there. Quiet. Present. And I let him know, without words, that I was grateful. That I loved him. That he would always be my father. After the funeral, Mark and I went to Bob's house. We had to pack up his things. We had to decide what to keep and what to give away. It was hard. Every object held a memory. Every room held a story. I walked into his bedroom. It was simple.
A bed.
A dresser. A closet. A rocking chair. And on the dresser, there was a photograph. A photograph of me and Bob. It was taken at the Grand Slam game. We were both smiling, both celebrating, both connected in a moment of pure joy. I picked up the photograph. I held it in my hands,
And I started to cry.
because I realized something. Bob had kept this photograph on his dresser, right next to his bed. He had looked at it every day. He had kept me close, even when I wasn't there. I was his daughter. Not by blood, by love.
And he had loved me. Deeply. Completely.
Without reservation. I took the photograph. I brought it home. I put it on my own dresser, right next to my bed, so I could look at it every day, so I could remember him, so I could carry his love with me. I still have it. I still look at it every morning, and every morning I smile, because Bob taught me something that I will never forget. He taught me that family is not about blood. It is about presence. It is about love. It is about showing up day after day, even when there is nothing to say. He taught me that belonging is not about fitting in. It is about being seen. It is about being accepted. It is about being loved for who you are, not who you pretend to be. He taught me that failure is not the end. It is the beginning. It is the path to growth. It is the way to become stronger, wiser, more human. He taught me that connection doesn't require perfect words. It requires presence. It requires attention. It requires the willingness to be with someone, even in silence. He taught me that love is not a feeling. It is a choice. A choice to show up. A choice to be present. A choice to believe in someone, even when they don't believe in themselves. And he taught me that baseball is not just a game. It is a language. A language that transcends borders, cultures, and accents. A language that can teach you more about a country than any textbook ever could. A language that can connect you to people you never thought you would understand. That is Bob's legacy. Not the baseball games. Not the porch. Not the sunset. The lessons. The love. The belonging. He passed those on to me. And now I am passing them on to you. Because if you are watching this video, I know something about you. I know you have felt like an outsider. I know you have struggled to belong. I know you have wondered if you would ever find your place. And I want to tell you something. You will. Not because you will become perfect. Because you will find people who see you, accept you, love you, not for who you pretend to be, for who you really are. And when you find those people, you will know what it feels like to belong, to be part of something bigger than yourself. To be loved for exactly who you are. That is what Bob gave me. That is what I want to give you. So, here is my final question for you. The question that I have been asking myself ever since Bob died. The question that I hope will stay with you long after this video ends. Who is your Bob? Who is the person who sees you? Who accepts you? Who loves you for who you are? And more importantly, who are you going to be for someone else?
Who are you going to see?
Who are you going to accept? Who are you going to love? Because that is what matters. That is what changes the world. That is what makes life worth living. Not the perfect English. Not the perfect grammar. Not the perfect accent. The connections. The love. The belonging.
Bob taught me that.
Through baseball. Through patience. Through presence. And now, I am passing it on to you. So go.
Find your Bob.
Be someone else's Bob. Show up. Be present. Love without reservation. And remember, sports teach more than words. They teach us how to belong, how to love, how to be human. That is the legacy. That is the gift. That is the lesson that will never end. You just watched a story about baseball. But it wasn't really about baseball. It was about a father-in-law who refused to let his foreign daughter-in-law be an outsider. It was about a worn-out glove that carried generations of love. It was about a grand slam that finally made me feel like I belonged. That man, Bob, taught me that sports can teach more than words ever can. He taught me patience. He taught me to embrace failure. He taught me that belonging is not about fitting in, it's about being seen. But here's the part one didn't tell you. Bob's lessons didn't end with baseball. There was something else he taught me, something I only understood after he was gone. In my next video, I'm going to share that final lesson with you. The one that changed how I see family, legacy, and the power of showing up. You won't want to miss it. So here's your call to action. Subscribe now, because the best stories are the ones that teach us how to belong. Comment one word, legacy, if you believe in the power of showing up for others. Like this video if you've ever been taught something that went beyond words. This channel is not about perfect grammar. It's about real people, real lessons, and the connections that change us, one story at a time. The people who see you are your family. Be that person for someone else. See you in the next video.